Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? Good. You're talking to me. Isn't that fun? Welcome back to Deliver It, the Agile Product Owners Podcast. My name's Corey Bryan. And today, instead of talking to an Agile coach, we're going to talk about something else. A little bit of a scheduling conflict, which is okay. Those things happen. And I've got a lot of things that I'm interested in talking about. So we'll do another solo show today. Talk about a really cool topic. And then we'll get Maureen on to talk about coaching product owners for another show next year. So I hope everybody's doing well. I'm getting used to my new surroundings and my new job and my new role, learning some new things, having some really good conversations. One of the things that has happened is since I'm working downtown now with a lot more businesses around, I get to hear a lot of conversations going to lunch or going, walking to and from the parking and to the vehicles and everything else. One of the things I overheard this week that made me cringe is somebody came that was talking on the phone, and he said, well, just put it in a Gantt chart for me. And I really, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Just somebody saying, just please put it in a Gantt chart so I can understand it. Yeah, there you go. I'd go back to my, my Twitter, encounter with Microsoft Project and how they wanted to be more agile. So that was fun. Like I said, a lot of good conversations. And that's one of the things I really like about doing the podcast is the ability for product owners who may not have the ability to talk to other product owners to really get some support, get some information, get some knowledge, and give them an outlet. So that's what I really like doing this for. So as I've been trying to wind up the year, which is what you do in December, and get ready for 2016, I went back and was looking at my reading list that I've got from Pocket, and, I'll throw some things in there, and then I'll read a few, if it's really interesting. And a few things I'll think, well, maybe not, and I'll leave it there for a while. Going through and trying to clean some of that up in the last couple of weeks, I found a couple articles that are really, stuck around, and I got to read them. And I think they're really relevant for product owners. So the first one, there's a leading Agile podcast, which I think I've mentioned before. So Dave Pryor does a podcast for Leading Agile. It's on SoundCloud, and I'll put a link to it in the show description so you can go and listen to it. He talks with Adam Ash on an episode, their iteration 5. They talk about measuring value and how they go about measuring value with different organizations that they are helping transition to Agile, or organizations that are already Agile and they want to get to the next level. So they do a lot of organizational change. And really, when you're talking about discovering value, you're not talking about team level stuff. You're talking about organization level stuff. And I really like that. So it's a really good podcast. It really resonates. So I suggest you all go listen to it. So one of the things they really talk about is how do you define value? How do you look for value? Teams can be building things, but if they aren't building anything that's valuable, then why are they doing that? So finding that value, I think, is a big key. And it's a challenge, of course. How do you define value? How do you measure value? And part of that measuring value, I think, is a big thing because it leads into metrics discussions. It leads into those types of discussions. One of the things I've been thinking about, and this kind of hit on it, is when you're looking at the top level of your organization or your top level of your product or your program or whatever you've got, it's one of these things where, if you're using this type of thing and you're using it really well, then when you deliver the software and you get customers to use it, you're not done still. There's actually another part there, which is how do you know that the goal that you had that you wanted to deliver with that epic or that feature has been met. So you've set up a goal, you set up a thing that you want to measure. How do you come back and measure it? So if you wanted to add, if you wanted to double your amount of premium users in the next 6 months, how do you do that? Do you go back and measure at 6 months? You should. And maybe that's where, in that big board, that big Kanban board you use at the top level, maybe you put another thing after kind of finished and delivered and in production to measure. So how often do you come back, or when should you come back and measure that story that you actually worked on, and then decide, did we actually hit that measurement? Did we actually hit our goal that we wanted for that product or not? So I think it's a really interesting concept to come back and actually talk a lot about those measurements. The product owner needs to understand that a little bit more when they're going through and trying to create a story. We've talked about that. Why are we doing this? I want you to build this for me because I think it'll do this. That was a very good line that he used in that. We want to define what they do. So, and it's one of these things where, and he talks about this as well, which is something I get really bent out of shape sometimes, which is the utilization trap. Are our people 100% allocated across, however many programs it takes them to get them 100% allocated? I hate that concept. It's very anti-agile. And they've got some great things in there that he talk about. Our goal isn't to burn hours or to use humans. It's to produce valuable software that gives us an outcome. If that means that they're not all 100% utilized, that should be okay because we've got a better outcome. Our goal is not to use up 100% of our human capital. That shouldn't be our goal. Our goal is a big business feature or a big business outcome that we want. That's what we should concentrate on. So I like that as well. A great quote there that says, we're trying to create light, not heat. So, with friction, you get heat, but you also should get light. So I like that as well. And that helps when you're trying to measure that value, when you're trying to define value. That really helps with your organization, making sure that everybody has the same goals. Everybody is going in the same direction. We're all doing the same thing for the same reason. So let's go get it done. So there's never any conflict at that point. I like that. Then the other one that I read was by John Dobson. It's an article called 2 Ways to Prioritize for Product Owners. Really good article that he talks about when you have a situation where a product owner has to balance different priorities, or they can't get somebody to prioritize something. Everything's high. Everything's one. Everything's, I want it all. I want it all. So there's ways, and we've talked about that before, ways you can do that. I like his way as well. It's basically, why is this critical? Is this a critical component or a feature? What comes first? What's the most complex thing that we need to work on? So he breaks it down into what's our minimum viable product and our minimum marketable product. That's an interesting concept, and I've seen both of those used synonymously, but they're really not. What will make the product, usable versus what will make the product sell, I think is a good way to think about that. And he breaks that down into one way to prioritize those things. So if you've got, and he uses a Flintstone car example, which is really interesting. So once you've gone through, you can take those things and say, is this a minimum viable feature or minimum marketable feature? What needs to come first, realistically, so you don't set up those dependencies? Which is the most complex? Which one of these is going to be the hardest one to build? And then one of the other aspects to look at is which has the most risk associated with it. So if we look at those things, those four things, so we choose whether it's viable or marketable. We choose which should come first as we're doing this, what's the most complex, and what has the highest risk. And using those dimensions, that will help us sort out what we should build first, which story we should actually tackle first. I like that idea. So that's a really good one. All right. So we're not going to be talking about coaching today with product owners, but we have got something that I've had on the backlog for this show that I'm very interested in. And I'm doing a little bit related to it at work, the last week. And it's product owner assessments. So as a product owner, I want to know how I'm doing. I want to know, am I good in some areas? What areas do I need to improve in? What types of things will make me better as a product owner? So there's lots of lists out there that say, hey, top 10 things a product owner should do, or these 5 things a product owner should never do, right? Those are good lists. I like looking at those and going, oh yeah, I do that one, or no, I don't do that one. That's not really an assessment though. That's not really something that's objective. It's just, here, do these things or don't do these things. So we're not going to talk about those, although every time I see one, I look at it just to see if there's something useful there. So it's not that. And I really had 3 of these things in mind. So one of them I lost between the time I put this on the backlog and today. I can't find it anymore. So I found a third one that's lame, and I want to give it as a lame representative of how to assess a product owner. And then I want to talk about two good ones. So the lame one comes from SAFe. So there's lots of things that SAFe does, and one of the things is it has its own assessments. So this one is basically part of the assessment is looking at product owners. The way that they rank these things are very basic. So it's 0 to 5, and it comes down to basically, do you know what a product owner is? Do you have backlogs? Do you rank those backlogs by business value? Really basic stuff. Do you plan? Do you plan with a team? And it's 6 or 7 questions, right? Not a lot of depth there, not a lot of good information in my mind, but it's an assessment. It's one of these things where you can look at it and say, okay, a lot of people are doing this, and this is what it is. So we're trying to decide, do we have a product owner for the team? Yes or no? 0 to 5. Sometimes, maybe, that type of thing. I like the concept of, do you know what a product owner is? If you're looking to transition an organization or something like that, or if you're a product owner going, okay, here's what I'm being asked to do I know what a backlog is? Do I have a backlog? Is it prioritized by business value? Yes, no, maybe so. So that's one assessment. It's a very basic one. I would say it's a starting point. I wouldn't say it's a good starting point. It's just a starting point. I think the next one that I want to talk about is really the best one to say, overall, how are our product owners, or how are our product owners actually looking? So the next one comes from Bob Galen. Bob worked with Bill Krebs on an Agile Journey Index assessment method. And out of that, he spun out a product owner view of that Agile journey. And it's a really good objective assessment for organizations and product owners. There's lots of depth here, and lots of good information about how to determine if your product owners are doing really well, and what areas do they need to focus in. One of the things that I'm curious about this assessment is it seems to be more of an outside view than an inside view. The third one we're going to talk about is more of an inside view to me. This one is a really good outside view. Now, it's not to say that product owners can't take this and fill this out themselves. They certainly could. It's one of these things where it's not really, how are you doing in this? It's how are your product owners doing in this? So it may take some mental gymnastics to kind of figure out, do I do this or do I not do this? I want to talk a little bit about this and go through some examples. Of course, we'll have a link to this one as well in the show notes. So Bob breaks this down into 4 separate areas: table stakes, basic practices, communication, and steering. So each one of those 4 have some different measurements or some different levels. And those levels are basically, there's 5 different levels again, and they score at 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. But they go a lot deeper. So whereas SAFe says, do you know what a product owner is? And, sometimes, maybe, always. Bob will look at something, or this Agile Journey Index will look at something and say, product owners, what level are you at here? So I'm going to read you level 7 for product owners. That's the 4th level, the next highest level. It says the Certified Scrum Product Owner level training fully understands the stakeholder communication and expectations management aspects of the role, balances well across the 4 quadrants of the role, and internal versus external focus. So that's one of these things you can look at and say, oh, I do that, or I don't do that, or that's really cool, or I don't know what that is. Their level 1 is there isn't a product owner or someone assuming the role. It's just a functional manager or a project manager is holding the role. I really like that. So it's very specific. It's very, here's what we've seen people do this, and this is good and this is not so good. So that scores a 1. So I really like that type of assessment. So another thing on this list is talking about valuation, talking about whether or not we know what value is as a product owner. I'm going to read you level 5. That they leverage value poker and other collaborative techniques to create a broader view to value. In the enterprise or at scale, the portfolio and program level valuation occurs across product backlogs. That's where you get into, are we just doing this for us, or are we doing this for the whole company? And where are we at in that? And there's 2 levels above that and 2 levels below that. So again, really good descriptive way to tell whether or not you're doing things for evaluation right. Another one I really like in this is the communications. I'm going to read you level 9, or the top level in communication. Active feedback gathering and sprint reviews. Actively communicate trade-offs, adjustments, and plan impacts in real time during each sprint. Instead of continuously deliver, involved in continuous communication, driven and inspired from the product organization. Really big, really key part of the product owner job is how well are you actually getting and giving feedback. That's really good. So the last one I want to read from this one is for the scaling option. So there's some testing there. There's some scaling things I think that are really important. I'm going to read you level 1 for scaling. So level 1 says minimum involvement in the scrum of scrums, more so at a point team level. No release level planning, nor road mapping. Product organization essentially views responsibility as providing product owners for teams and continuing their processes and tactics. That's a really good description to say the product owners are only focused on their teams and on their little slice, and they're being told what to do. They're not looking up. They're not looking forward. They're just working and just driving that work. So I think all product owners, no matter what level you're at, should be looking up, should be looking to the future, should be looking at what are we doing in the next 3 months, 6 months, what's our big goal for the year? And all the stories and all the things that we're doing should be part of that. So that is Bob Galen and Bill Krebs' Agile Journey Index, product owner-centric version. Really good assessment, and really good thing to look at every once in a while. So I recommend that very much. So the last one I'm going to talk about is my own assessment. I did a presentation back in April to a local group of something that has been in my mind for a couple of years. Basically a way to say, how am I doing? How do I feel? And it's very internal. So it's very introspective. It's very much how do I think I need to do, or what do I need to work on for me as an individual product owner? So it's very introspective. It's very inward facing. So when I look at this, and it took me a while to come up with this, of course, iterated on a couple times, and finally got to the point where I thought I could put it in a presentation and talk about it. So there's 4 areas. So Bob has his 4 areas that he looks at. I picked 4 areas of focus for the product owner that I wanted to gauge or rate. So the 4 areas that I have are my team, the team that I'm working with, the product that I have, the customers that I have, and IT or the company. And I do put them in that order, in that rank order. The team comes first. The product comes second. The customers come third, and IT or my company comes fourth. The reason being is if I have a good team, a really good team, and they're producing a really kick-ass product, then I'm going to have happy customers. And if I have happy customers, I'm going to have a happy company. So that's my logic behind that. It's not foolproof, but that's the way I think about things. So team first, product second, customer, and then IT. So I want to talk about some of the ways that I do this. So for each of these dimensions, so for team, so I want to look at a couple of things with these teams. I want to have a couple measurements. So, anywhere from 5 to 10 different measures that I want to say, am I doing this or am I not doing this? And I'm going to grade on that. So I have positive things and negative things, and I get scored on each of those positive or negative things. I can go up or I can go down depending on what that is. So I'm going to read you some examples, just to talk about how that manifests itself. So let's look at some positive things for the team. One of the ones that we've talked about a lot is work is done, right? Stories are getting finished early in the sprint. The team's asking you to look at them. The sooner the work is finished, the faster you can build confidence in the team that they're actually doing and working on the right thing. So that's a positive. So if you're doing that, then I would say that's a +1. If you're not doing that, then I'd say that's a -1. If sometimes you're doing that, then I'd say it's a 0. So that's usually my grading scale is a +1, -1, or a 0. So we either are doing this, we aren't doing this, or So that's an example for the team that's positive. Example for the team that's negative is something like they only do what they need to do. They keep to themselves in meetings, demos, and stand-ups, and they're just there for the tasks and can't wait to leave. So the team is not really focused in on the team and actually participating. So that would be it's seen as a negative, of course. Hope you agree with that. And if they are doing that, then I would give them a -1. If they're not doing that, then I would give them a +1. So we kind of flip the script there. And again, if they're doing it sometimes, then I give them a 0. So that's 2 examples on the team. Let's talk about 2 examples for the product. So one of the things I think you can say on the product is that it answers the why. So the story or the goal of why somebody wants to use your product or application is important. They want to do something, right? So now that they have that, can they do it? Very important. So again, +1, -1, or 0. One of the things I really I really try to focus on with my products when I'm looking at things. And one of the things I think is a very negative aspect is if multiple teams or companies have worked on your product, can you tell? You know, is it obvious that they use different techniques or technologies to put it together? Can you tell where those lines are? If you can, then that's a very negative thing. So you would get -1 for that. If you can't, then you would get a +1. So that's good examples on the product. So 2 examples on the customer side. So when we're talking to the customer, a positive thing is if we're talking about learning, if we're talking about new ideas that we generate every time we see a build or a version or something, and we add the backlog with those new ideas, and we figure out when we'll start working with them. If the customer gets that we're learning a lot and they're learning a lot with their products, I think that's a really good thing. One of the things I think that's a real negative for the customer as well is if they want to have everything. So they have 100% mentality, which is everything they ask for. I want to see that. Otherwise, they can't be bothered to look at it. So that's really, that's a lesson that I learned, which is, you have to work with your clients and your customers to get over that. I gave you a 6-month plan. I want to see everything in the 6-month plan. I can't be bothered to look at something less than that. That's a learned thing. They have to come out of that, but it's something that you can identify really upfront and say, have they made that switch yet? Are they still looking for 100%, or are they okay with the most important thing today? And we showed that to them and they're interested. So that's a thing that I think to keep track of as well. And again, the reason for doing this is just to say, where am I at? So you could do this daily. I usually do it at least every sprint, definitely do it every release to say, what do I need to focus on next? And really, how am I doing with each of these areas? Am I really good with the team, but not so good with making sure the product's there? Or am I having a problem with the customers? And the company's really happy with me. Really ways to look at what do I need to improve on each one of those measures. You can look at one for a sprint. You can look at one or a couple of those items for the release and say, this is what I need to get better at. And this is how I know I need to get better at that. So I've taken these assessments or any of these assessments and said, this is what I need to work on. So that's the main goal, is how can I get better? Constantly looking to get better. And I think the one that I have, which is what I use a lot, and iterating on and come up with new ideas, and the one that Bob has, I think are your 2 best options. You can start with the safe one, and that's okay. But I think as a product owner, you should really look to some good ones. Now, here's some things that I don't want you doing with assessments. Or if anybody tries to measure you by these things, you should say no or find a different way. So if they're trying to measure you by how much velocity your teams have, that's a no-no. The team velocity is for the team and for you to plan. It's not a way to assess how good you're doing. If you have a higher velocity, you're not necessarily doing better than if you have a low velocity. So that's a very good thing. Anything that's basically manufacturing based, how many widgets are you producing, or how the number of stories that you have, those are bad metrics, or bad ways to try to measure a product owner, or frankly for a team. So try to resist those, or do resist those, at all costs. Keep it focused on outcomes. Keep it focused on getting better, improving with teams, with products, and with other elements as well. And one other thing I want to mention, I did find a professional Scrum product owner assessment, which you can take online. That costs $700 and it's in 2 parts. So I didn't look at that because I didn't want to spend $700. And the ones that I've given you, both Bob's and mine, are completely free. You can download Bob's PDF that he's got all these things in. I'll have a link to my SlideShare where I give this as a presentation. You can look through that. I haven't yet put it into a survey type thing, but you can definitely look at it and add it up on your own like I did in Excel. So don't pay for it, but have some way to measure things. So hope that helps with you trying to assess yourself and get better, which, again, product owners constantly get better. All right. Now we are going to have some questions. If you have any feedback or any questions about product ownership, you can let me know on Twitter at DeliveritCast, or you can email them in at deliveritcast@gmail.com. Also looking for people to share the show around and drop us a rating on iTunes if you feel the need. One of the things that was very nice from Bob is he's given us some copies of his Scrum product ownership book, which we're going to give away. We're going to give them away by each show. We're going to have the best questions going to get the book. So if you want to ask us a question, you're interested in acquiring a copy for free of Bob's book. And we're also going to have, and this is the thing I'm waiting on, Kim's going to make us some Deliver-It bookmarks so that we can put that in there. And you can use that on all your other books that you're reading, because as a product owner, you're constantly reading, constantly learning. So we'll have both of those. We'll do one per show, starting with the next show. So send in your questions, send in your ideas or your feedback. And when we pick the best one, we'll send you a book and a bookmark. There you go. 2 questions that we were able to pull today. One's from Angelina. Very interesting question. Can a CEO be a long-term product owner for a product? Does a CEO really have that much time? So there's 2 things that I will kind of caveat this answer with. First is, how big is the company? So if the company is, less than 50, then probably, because it was their company to start with or their product to start with. They probably coded on it or started with it, and now they're the CEO and they're very attached to it. So if it's less than 50, I would probably say you probably can't do anything but have that. Above that, no, you need a product owner. You need somebody to focus. You need somebody to really own all the aspects, because the CEO should be running the business. That's their job. And the product, although they may still be really interested in it, really needs to be a product owner. So that can be tricky too, because CEOs and a lot of business people, once they get locked into, well, that's my thing, and I've done that for so many years, and I know how to do that, handing it off to somebody else who's not going to do exactly what they wanted, or exactly how they did the role or that product is going to change. So bottom line, no, they shouldn't be. But they should be talking to the CEO and making sure that the business and those things are aligned, if that's something they've done before. And the next question comes from Mira. She says, what is better in a review meeting? The product owner should be working on the agreed environment and trying things by himself, or is it fine that one of the dev team members demo and respond to the instructions of the PO? So by the review meeting, I'm guessing that they're talking about the demo. They may be talking about the story acceptance part. I'm not sure there. So I'll answer both parts, just to cover. So if it's about story acceptance, the product owner should be trying that out in an environment that's not the dev boxes, the dev machine. So when I'm accepting a story, I want that story put in a place where I can actually use it. And it's not got any, Band-Aids or bells and whistles to make it work. It just works. So I want an environment where I can go see it work and try it out. And then I'll accept the story. I'll use that acceptance criteria in the back. I'll use, how does it fit with everything else? And then I'll accept the story. So it should be on a deployable environment that I do that in. As far as the demo goes, I think it's really good to have the team members actually showing those stories to the demo audience. So to your stakeholders, to your clients. I think it's a good thing to get those dev members used to presenting, used to explaining the business value, and used to explaining, how that's done in a very concise way. So I think both of those are good. I think the demo, again, should be done in a non-development environment. It should be done in a deployable environment. If you've got a systems testing environment or a pre-prod environment, something like that, then yeah, let's do it there. But not something that's in a dev box that, won't work when it's pushed to production. I've seen that too many times, both from a testing background and the product background, where it works on my machine, but we didn't deploy this, so it doesn't really work. So I'm very specific when I'm looking at a product, and I'm accepting a story or testing something. I want it to be somewhere that's as close to production as we can get it. So there's our two questions. Thank you, Angelina and Mira. And thank you, everyone. So this has been a fantastic year with starting the podcast, learning how to do this, getting some feedback, and starting to figure out and trying to help. So that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to help, trying to get some more information out there, trying to get good information for product owners out there. And we've been pretty successful. We've had 25 countries on this lovely little planet that have listened to us, including in the U.S. We've had 23 states we've had coverage in. We've had over 1,600 listens of all the episodes that we've done, the 21 episodes we've done so far. And it's amazing. I really get a good vibe from when people send us comments on Twitter or send us information in email, tell them how much they like the show or what they've done with the show or how they listen to the show. Really great feedback and really helpful for me as we start to do this. So next year, we're going to do some more. I have lots of things on our show backlog that I want to talk about. We're going to do the giveaway. We're going to do all kinds of things in the next year. So I hope everybody is, thank you all for joining us this year. Thank you all for sticking it out with us and contributing. So I really appreciate it. One little bit of housekeeping note is the next show is scheduled to be December 30th. I'm going to take that off, so for the Christmas time. So we won't do a show in late December, but we are going to do a show in early January. So around January 13th is when you'll send the next one. We'll put out something. I've tried to find out what the most popular episode this year is and tweet that out on the 30th so you can catch back up. So with that, there we go. These words are our own. They're not endorsed or representative of any company or organization. You can find me online. It is Corey Bryan on Twitter. And I wrote a blog post, which will come out soon. Should be out now, actually. Over at don'tyellatme.wordpress.com. So check that out. So thank you very much for helping me deliver episode 22. And I will see you next time.